The first thing we're going to be reacting to tonight is actually a video. This one was suggested by Soriel. The video by the Space Coder, and this one caught my eye. Soriel also suggested like 2 other Reddit posts that were with this. I'm not a big fan of scrolling through Reddit because their layout is shit and really difficult to like go the content. But this video definitely caught my eye, and it's been a while since I've done a reaction to a video, so I'm interested in seeing what this is. But we'll come across to here. The title of the video is Star Citizen has a murder hobo problem, which is an interesting take because I always thought Star Citizen has a Carebear problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mute the music and we're going to start watching and finding out why the Space Coder says that Star Citizen has a murder hobo problem.
Hello citizens and welcome back. In today's video, I want to take a look at the murder hobo problem in Star Citizen, why it happened, and what can AG do about it. Murder hobos are a problem in pretty much every game that allows combat, and different games handle it differently. Star Citizen is missing a lot of these mechanics and seeing a lot of these problems. But what can CAG do now and in the future to help? As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. And here's a shout out to our amazing patrons and channel members for their support of the channel and everything else I do. First of all, I should define what I mean by murder hobo, especially in the context of Star Citizen. I believe the term originated in tabletop role-playing games, but it very much applies to video games as well. A murder hobo is a player that uses combat and violence as their main approach to solving problems. They will often attack players and NPCs instead of diplomacy or stealth or any other non-combat approach.
What? Yeah, that's literally what I was about to say, Kiki. I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? Well, I guess Call of Duty is just full of murder hobos, right? Fucking, what the hell? Instead of doing no rushing and shooting up an airport, just go out there and hold up protest signs and hand out pamphlets. Yeah, if you engage in combat as your means of solving a problem, you're a murder hobo, according to this guy so far. There might be a bit more to it, but it's like, yeah, if you solve all your problems using combat, you're a murder hobo. Right, we're only a minute in too.
They will ignore most of the narrative elements in favor of combat. They do this for no gain besides the personal pleasure from creating chaos.
Yes, you need to announce your intent like a Victorian gentleman. Every time you go to engage somebody, before you pull the trigger, you must challenge them to a duel. A duel to the death. I need to go back because he gives like the definition is disjointed now, but yeah. Oh god, King, let's not go there, man.
Often attack players and NPCs instead of diplomacy or stealth or any other non-combat approach. They will ignore most of the narrative elements in favor of combat. They do this for no gain besides the personal pleasure from creating chaos. In Star Citizen, this would apply to people who randomly bomb outposts or ram you while you're landed or camp bunker entrances and take out people who come in for missions. Now, I know what about half of you are going to say. It's the PvPers, they're ruining the game. And that's the wrong way to look at it. Not every player who does PvP is a murder hobo, and
I've already got a problem with his fucking logic chain, because this person's under the assumption that the intent of the other person, and yeah, he is going back on his words, but like the assumption is that they know the intent of the other person, and if the intent of the other person doesn't line up with their personal principles, then they're a murder hobo. Like, oh yeah, somebody just showed up and randomly bombed the outpost that I was at and they killed me in the process. Like, maybe that person was bombing that outpost because it was an objective they needed to conduct. But yeah, like the whole idea behind what old mate's saying is just dumb. Like, oh, like unless there's a material objective for doing it, you're a murder hobo. But you don't know their material objective because you're not a fucking mind reader. So how the hell would you? Well, they ran me for no reason. Maybe they don't want you there. Maybe they're bloody prepping the site for their org to come in, and it's like, hey, we need to get rid of this person's ship because it's in the fucking way. Well, we could reach out to them. They're not listening in chat. Oh, well, ram the ship then. Hit the ship, bomb the outpost, clear it out. Like, that's not being a murder hobo. That's just bloody clearing the gameplay space of any potential threats. But because like this other person won't know that, and all they're gonna see is a bomb dropping on their head, they're just gonna cry, they're a fucking murder hobo, which is dumb. You guys are already fucking kicking home goals.
Actually, not every murder hobo does PvP. Some of them just kill all the NPCs at a location and run away when a player shows up. So why is this a
What? So a player does a bunker mission. A player does a bunker mission, clears out all the NPCs, and then runs away because a player shows up. It's like the PvE community is full of murder hobos then. All the PvE players are murder hobos. The amount of times that they show up to these bloody bounty mission sites, and they just murder all the NPCs, leaving nothing there. Did they try and talk to them? Did they try the non-lethal route and drug them? Bet they didn't. Full of murder hobos. It's fucking dumb. Not even 2 minutes in.
problem in Star Citizen? Well, simply put, there are no consequences to being a murder hobo. I mean, there is the crime stat system in lawful areas, but according to many players, the prison system is not an effective deterrent. We also have defenses and armistice zones around certain locations, but not every location has one or the other, and they are not always effective. An armistice zone also doesn't prevent ramming, and station armistice zones still allow the use of ship weapons. At the same time, measures like hard armistice zones limit player freedom, which is one of the main selling points of Star Citizen and many other MMOs. Now, how big of a problem is it? Well, depends on where you are and who you ask. In my observations, in Stanton this is pretty rare and limited to one location at a time, and generally it's difficult to discern between a murder hobo and a person shooting first and asking questions later because they're there to do something and don't want you to interfere.
What? Like, how the fuck then? This is why this murder hobo fucking nonsense is so stupid. Like, oh yeah, I understand their intent. No, you don't. You're not gonna know. Like, this is just spreading that fucking toxic anti-PvP mentality. Star Citizen doesn't have a murder hobo problem. Wait, you're playing in Pyro. Let's talk about Pyro, the amount of players that are getting killed there. It's open world PvP, right? Like, the entire game is open world PvP. How you approach a problem is entirely up to you. If you see another player and you think that they're going to be a problem, you're well within your rights to attack them within the gameplay rules, as long as you're willing to deal with the consequences of that. But at no point do you ever have to announce your intentions. Oh, sorry. Holy shit, man. You found a gem. That's for sure, man. You found a fucking gem. Yeah, Doug, that's right. The pirates are not the murder hobos, but the PvEers who do bunker missions and kill all the NPCs there and run away are. Oh my god. I don't know if I'll make it through the entire video.
Then again, the latter usually try to communicate with you first. Now, in Pyro, the situation is very different. Violence is much more common, and I saw many instances where someone would fly to an outpost, destroy all the parked ships, and fly away. For the most part, this can be expected. But there are no narrative reasons in the game for players to have a good reason to do this, but we will get to that in a moment. Now let me take a brief pause to fuel my caffeine dependency. Most of you watching are not subscribed, so go on and click that button. Also, don't forget to check out the latest episode of the Comedy podcast and my community apps, The Hauler and The Armory. Now let's get back to the video. So how do other games deal with murder hobos? There are a few ways, and not all of them are suitable for every kind of game. And we will get to how Star Citizen could do it in a moment. First, let's talk about the different methods of mitigating murder hobo behavior. And keep in mind that I'm trying to mention options that don't outright disable combat or PvP. The simplest and most obvious solution is the PvP flag, or the dreaded PvP toggle in Star Citizen.
The PvP flag. This doesn't stop them from dying. Like, this is the idea of a PvP flag in this type of game is idiotic. It doesn't work, alright? It's not going to work. Players are going to exploit the shit out of it because that's players. That's the way that they like to play the game. Doug wants PvP flags on his private server just to be extra safe. Are you winning the fight that I started turns on PvE flag? Haha, you can't kill me. Yes, trying to offer solutions that don't outright disable PvP. The first thing he says, PvP flag. Like, a PvP flag won't work in this game because of the way that it's been built. You'd have to have completely separate servers to be able to pull that off, and CIG isn't going to want to do that. The game isn't built like that either. Like, just because you turn a PvP flag on doesn't mean that you're not going to die to other things. right? Like, how do you mitigate against somebody going, all right, I'm going to fly into the middle of this battle with my PvP flag off, take no damage from anyone, and then I'm going to ram this one specific ship in the middle of this battle so that I can take out their like key asset by turning the PvP flag back on so that I'm able to take damage and they'll take damage from me too. Because a PvP flag normally means like you can't apply damage to other players and they can't apply damage to you, right? So there's that sort of manipulation there that can be utilized to gain tactical advantages in PvP fights. Like, that's why you can't do a PvP flag system in a game like this, because people will abuse it, turn the PvP flag off so that they can get nice and close, and as soon as they get close to you, try and ambush you. Everybody would weaponize it. Here's the thing is, like, you'd be stupid not to. In a PvP based environment, you try and leverage every advantage that you can that doesn't put you outside the gameplay rules. Which is why, like, if you're playing in the contested zones, I don't do it, but I probably should. Using reshade to bloody change the color of everything so I can see better. Pick up on players easier and things like that. Because reshade isn't bloody a banned add-on that you can use. It's still whitelisted. The IG's okay with players using it. They shouldn't. It shouldn't be a thing because it's an, you know, you can gain an unfair advantage using it, but it just means that everybody uses it. And if like, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. So yeah, like if you wanted to weaponize a PvP flag, what would happen is all the PvP groups would be flying around with their PvP flags off, and they'd wait until they get close to each other, and then, you know, it'd come down to being like a quick draw of who can turn their PvP flag on at the same time as the other guy and start attacking. Or you'd be looking for the ones who don't have their PvP flags on to avoid them, and then looking for the ones who do have their PvP flags on. All the Carebear orgs, they would just be making credits hand over fist. Because when people talk about, yes, that's right, Secret, just like on GTA Online. But you hear about like this whole, like, oh, I want a PvP flag because I don't want to fight other people and I don't want to get attacked by other players, but they never talk about their economic impact. They want to be a part of the same gameplay space, but they don't want to be attacked by other players. Like, piracy is a gameplay loop that is supposed to influence the economic balance of the game. Now, the majority of that influence is going to be AI based to a certain extent, depending on how good that AI is. But CIG is always going to rubber band the AI, so like players feel challenged but not overwhelmed, unless they absolutely want them to feel overwhelmed. But most of the time they're not. So like, if we take an example from the presentations that Tony Zook did a few years ago about Quantum and the Star Citizen economy, and the Quanta and how they could create scenarios where like there'd be a gold rush. A massive vein of gold is found on a moon. Everybody starts going there to mine it. All the miners, all the logistics, all the industry minded entities go to start harvesting that gold. Next thing, the pirates show up because they're like, well, they've done all the hard work, I'm just going to grab their stuff and then bloody make a profit off of their effort. So then the industrial players, or the industrialists, hire security, and the security comes in to balance it all out, and we have this three-way balance thing happening until all that gold is gone. The problem with a PvP flag is that all the players that would go there would just turn it off so that you can't do anything to them. Now, CIG would need to increase the effect that AI have to compensate for the lack of players being able to influence that, which means that either the AI becomes so overbearing on those players that they just decide to stop anyway, or they complain to the point where CIG just dials it back and these players are making credits hand over fist, risk-free, and they're just able to build, collect all these resources. They'll do base building, they'll do, crafting and things like that without any sort of obstacles in their way to challenge them, to overcome them. And that throws the entire economy out, because all the groups that are out there and they're doing PvP and they're engaged in organization warfare and all that sort of stuff, they're at a disadvantage because they can lose their stuff to other players as well as AI. The PvP flag system essentially reduces the level of risk that those PvE players will encounter. So CIG would need to offset that. But here's the problem, is that those NPCs, that AI, it doesn't matter if they're attacking players with PvP flags on or off, they're going to attack everyone. So if all the AI get dialed up to 11 to try and create this consequence for these PvE only players that have their PvP flags off, the PvP players who show up are going to have to deal with that heightened threat AI as well. And they're going to just be killing AI and be forced into PvE. Meanwhile, all these PvE players are just getting away with doing whatever the fuck they want, making credits hand over fist, driving up the prices of everything in the economy to the point where all the PvP groups have to stop doing what they're doing and focus on doing other loops to make credits and not being able to play the game the way that they want. And that's one of the problems that I have with this fucking militant, this toxic, militant anti-PvP crowd, right? Because that's what this video is. This is anti-PvP. Like, old mate can sit there and say, oh yeah, I'm for PvP. They're not. They wouldn't care if this wouldn't even exist. This video wouldn't exist if they cared about bloody PvP. The solution that they're offering is a way of killing off PvP gameplay in the persistent universe. That's what they're doing. They're trying to push this agenda to kill it off. It's probably also a clickbait title to try and, get more support on their channel, get more subscribers, get more views, get more likes. The algorithm starts trying to share their video with more people. But this whole argument that they're putting forward about the PvP flag, it doesn't work in a game like Star Citizen. PvP flags normally don't work well in most games. People will cite games like World of Warcraft and the PvP flag system there. It's like, all right, well, those players don't only engage in PvP. They'll engage in both styles of gameplay. In a game like Star Citizen, with the amount of, freedom of movement that you have in the game, with the amount of freedom of choice that you have, introducing such an artificial limitation will kill the game. Because the only time that you'll be able to do any sort of PvP is with the orgs that are flagged as PvP. That's it. The whole, mentality of, freedom and threats coming from potentially anywhere, or threats being able to be mitigated with diplomacy, because in the PvP flag system, why would I bother engaging in diplomacy with orgs that won't flag themselves as PvP? There's no need to. I'll just see them there and I'll be like, oh, I'm not even going to bother talking to them. Then there's the other side of this, right? The Mongrel Horde is comprised of 4 organizations. Our logistics organizations, I would make them always have their PvP flags off. I would never let them put their PvP flags on, and they would just be farming all the time. Always farming, developing kit for us, fighting that kit, because they're the ones that are going to be supplying us, providing us the logistical support. So it doesn't make sense, right, for them to be put into a position where our logistics can be attacked. So I'll have them turn their PvP flags off, so they're invulnerable. They can't be attacked by players, which are, for a PvP org, those who are engaging in organization warfare, is just like a massive weight off their shoulders. They don't have to worry about defending their logistics lines, which this effectively kills organization warfare at the industrial scale, because the only time that you're ever supplying stuff is to replace the losses that the PvP groups are having. But those PvP groups, their fights that they're going to be having are going to be far and few between, unless they're at known location. And that's something that Star Citizen isn't going to really be focusing on, especially with organization warfare, is that the entire fucking gameplay space is a potential war zone. You've just got to deal with the different consequences of waging war in a system like Terra versus Pyro. Because in Pyro, they probably wouldn't give a flying fuck. And in Terra, the bloody UEE would be showing up on force to bloody reinforce the rule of law and kick yous all out. If we don't need to worry about defending our logistics lines, defending our ability to, resupply ourselves, wars will just keep going forever. There's no ability to reduce your opponent's capacity to maintain a war. It literally just comes down to, oh, we've killed you 10,000 times, you've killed us 10,000 times, but we can keep supplying ourselves and we can't stop you and they can't stop us. So this war just keeps going on forever and ever. Oh, we destroyed all their bases. Right, well, cool. Well, then what we'll do is we'll get all of our PvE orgs, our logistics orgs, which are all, their PvP flags are off, to build the bases for us so you can't destroy them or raid them, right? Like, this PvP flag idea is so idiotic. For a game like Star Citizen, it does not work. You have to change the entire gameplay space. Pretty much, you can't have any PvP happening in that sort of environment, which will probably lead into the next solution, which is PvE servers. So let's keep watching. Yeah, that's right, Secret. And DRG isn't going to do that because the game would have to change dramatically for that to work.
Or the dreaded PvP toggle in Star Citizen. Now, the problem is that it doesn't actually fix or discourage being a murder hobo. It just makes it easier to avoid PvP, and that's not exactly what we want, given the open nature of Star Citizen and the plan being for PvP to be possible anywhere. Also, a PvP flag is very explicit, which might not fit into the immersive feeling of Star Citizen. A more immersive alternative are PvP zones. essentially a structured area where PvP is allowed, but those have the same issues as a PvP flag. Now we could reverse this and create armistice zones where combat is not allowed at all.
We already have a PvP zone. It's called the Persistent Universe. And reversing it, like going, oh yeah, there's armistice zones where combat can't happen. Like, we already have that. They're limited for a reason, because CIG wants players to have to face danger. They want players to face risk. Right? If they wanted to create like a fucking mining simulator where you microwave rocks all day without the threat of any sort of encounter against players, they could create a mode in Arena Commander for it, and you can microwave all the rocks you want to your heart's content. But that's not the game that CIG is building. Like, this whole premise of there being a murder hobo problem is this is just cascading into this idiotic I was about to say dialogue, but it's not a dialogue. This idiotic argument of like trying to solve a problem that really doesn't exist. Like, if you're worried about getting killed, don't go anywhere alone. Keep somebody in security at all times. If you don't like that, stay away from the areas that are really dangerous. Like Pyro. That system where all the fucking Carebears said Pyro is for PvP. That's where all the PvPers and murder hobos are gonna go. And then they all fucking came to Pyro and started getting killed, and now they're crying about it. Fucking idiotic.
Which is partially where we are right now in Star Citizen, which brings us to the same issues. So what other measures are there? Well, that brings us to crime, punishment, and reputation. If we can't disable combat or PvP, we have to introduce rules and consequences to breaking those rules. In other words, a legal system. In lawful areas, killing players or NPCs becomes a crime. If you commit that crime, you become wanted, which looks differently depending on the game. In Skyrim or ESO, that means you will have to pay a fine or a bounty will be placed on your head, which will cause guards to attack you. In Star Citizen, you can also go to prison to serve your sentence or work to shorten it. At the same time, if you commit crimes repeatedly, your reputation in that area goes down, which might result in settlements refusing service or guards attacking you right away. In some games, this even visibly displays for other players, which lets them know someone might be dangerous. In unlawful areas, things are a bit different, but we will get to that in a moment. We know that Star Citizen is planning to go this route, since we already have a very early version of a legal system, with crime stats, prison, bounties, and fines. But what's the point if it doesn't stop murder hobos at all? Well, at the same time, it doesn't limit the freedom of player actions, which is actually more important. So when you think about it, the actual goal is not to prevent players from being a murder hobo, it's about making being a murder hobo extremely difficult, which will discourage some players from becoming one. And
no, it won't. Apparently your message was aggressive there, Sorrel. You made a news meme when the first jump gate was in Evo, 2 of the tickers read, Carebears rejoices PvP is fuck off to Pyro, followed immediately by Carebear anger at PvP and Pyro. Yeah. Oh man. I think everybody that does PvP kind of knew that this shit was going to come. Now, old mate, this video just feels like he's just reiterating the gameplay systems that's already in-game now. Like, he's talking about a lore system and bounties and things like that, and that's what other games have used. Now it sounds like he's trying to backflip on the apparent murder hobo problem and trying to reduce, like, the lore system, trying to reduce the amount of players that engage in murder hobo behavior. And I don't think that'll actually happen. It's not the lore system, it's the consequences for breaking them, right? If murder hoboing, or just killing lots of NPCs and players results in negative reputation and a criminal rap sheet that's really long, your prison sentence could be one of those things where it's like, all right, you're going to be spending a long time in prison, which will encourage players to want to escape. But they could also do things in prison gameplay to make it a less attractive place to be. But the most important thing that we all have to remember is we're playing a video game, and we backed Star Citizen, not Star Convict. Just like we didn't back Star Criminal or Star Carebear. Right? So prison needs to be a consequence where players go, all right, I don't want to end up here too often. So if I keep playing the way that I want, I need to accept that there's certain restrictions that I'm going to have to put on myself, but some of those restrictions may not matter at all. You know, like, if I'm going to clear an outpost of players, or I'm going to show up and bomb an outpost because we're about to do something there, or we're going to trade and it's Pyro and I don't want any sort of threats, you know, hidden or known, then, and I have the ability to, I'll bomb the fucking place. I haven't been to Klesher on my main. I've been to Klesher on one of my alt. I think it's still there. I pretty much got sent to Klesher, waited the next day, went to leave, couldn't leave, and I'm like, all right, I'll just wait until they fix it. Hex, you thought you signed up for Super Mario All-Star Citizen Dance Dance Revolution? Dude, they only do that at Area 18. You gotta go there, man, to do your dance-offs. Well, the bounty marker system being broken means like having a bounty in Star Citizen, like in Stanton, isn't as punishing as what it was before, right? Because I ended up with a level 4 crime stat while we were in Stanton for that 1 week, and I'm just like, oh, we've got no pressure. Not the players that you're afraid of, it's the game. I'm not afraid of the game. If I get sent there, I get sent there. I'll work it out from there. But that's the thing, and I don't think this person understands really, like, what they're calling a murder hobo problem isn't what they're describing as murder hobos aren't. And the idea behind trying to utilize the consequence of prison as, you know, a deterrent, like I'm pointing out here, it's one of those things where, like, and I say this, you know, as a criminal player in Star Citizen, it's prison is an obstacle, not a deterrent. More people are trying to sneak into personal hangars again. We had this at the start. I guess their bans must have finished at the start when 4.0 preview went live. There was issues with hangars overlapping and people exploiting that fact and attacking other players in their own hangars when they were overlapping. Pretty sure CIG gave a lot of people vacations then. Prison is an obstacle for players who want to engage in criminal gameplay in Star Citizen. It's not a consequence, it's not a deterrent. All it is, okay, I need to understand how this game mechanic works so that I can be more calculated with the risks that I'm taking. It's all premise of what old mate's talking about. I'm getting the impression this is clickbait. Like, we've just gotten over 25% of the way through this video. Yeah, old mate's talking about the consequences and using the law system as a method of deterring murder hobos. Let's keep listening, get through this, because we're already an hour through the stream.
And with some luck, it will keep those who can't be discouraged away from other players who want to play the game. So how can Star Citizen expand its law and reputation system in order to achieve this goal? Well, actually in 4.0.1, you're testing an improvement that, while not directly related to reputation, might be pretty effective at keeping disruptive players away from outposts and space stations. CIG are significantly increasing the aiming speed of defensive turrets, which should be pretty interesting. We will see how it actually works out, but I think it gives us a little bit of deterrence for someone staying at a location and shooting at ships flying by or trying to land. But if the attacker destroys the defenses, the location becomes dangerous until the defenses respawn or someone repairs them, which could be an interesting mission for ground-based locations. It would also be nice if there was some warning on the star map when a location is under attack. At the same time, improving the defenses won't prevent a determined group of attackers from locking down the location, which according to CIG should be possible but difficult. You have to keep things believable. A random outpost in Pyro is probably not equipped to handle a Polaris showing up and destroying everything, but it should be more than capable of fending off a few fighters and maybe a gunship. And that
But then the weapon of choice by these supposed murder hobos will change. Like, this logic chain that he's going through right now of the outpost defenses being better, there's already a couple of flaws in it, and we need to see it in game first before we can comment on it with too much accuracy. But one of the problems that I know of with regards to player killing at outposts, or just people being able to engage each other, is the reputation system. The reputation system allows two players that have high enough reputation to go to the same outpost, and if they start fighting, it doesn't affect their rep, and neither of them go hostile for the NPCs, which is the crucial factor really if you want to try and stop random killing at outposts. Like making the turrets aim better, fire faster, making the missiles more potent on the missile turrets can all contribute to reactionary scenarios. But if the reputation of two groups, or if the reputation of two players is the same with a faction's outpost that they're visiting and they start fighting, they'll do absolutely nothing, and it doesn't solve the problem, which means that player ships could still be destroyed from the air. They just need to make sure that they've got the right reputation with that faction before showing up. Yeah, like if the idea is to try and deter players from killing each other, that's a tall order. Like, why? What consequences are so severe that CIG would put in there that would make players go, I'm going to let them go. I'm not going to bother killing them, I'm not going to bother destroying their ships. And how do they stop it from being overbearing? Because once again, remember what I said, being a criminal player in Star Citizen, I don't look at the law system as a deterrent, I look at it as an obstacle to overcome. So if I want to wipe out an outpost, I'm not going to sit there and go, well, I'm going to end up with all these crime stats, I'm not going to do it. It'll be like, how do I do this in a way where I get the least amount of crime stats possible? Or if I'm going to get the crime stats, how do I mitigate the impact that having those criminal charges against me will have in future gameplay? And if I get sent to prison, then how do I get myself out of prison as quickly as possible? You know, these are all the thought processes of how you would deal with these sorts of things if you're bloody thinking along those sorts of lines. And the problem that we've got here is that we don't have a PvP orientated player thinking like this. We've got a Carebear telling us about the Star Citizen murder hobo problem and how CIG could solve it. That's the thing, is like, this person isn't thinking along those lines. A star map alert system, I think that would make sense for Stanton, would make sense, probably not Pyro. Pyro I think should be faction restricted. That would make sense then. But yeah, like a star map alert system would be okay. Like, I'm okay with that to a certain point. I don't like the idea behind a magic, there's a lot of combat happening in this one place, right? Like, well, there's a lot of combat happening everywhere. The system would just be pinging all the time, but the Care Bears would be freaking out going, oh my god, there's death and destruction everywhere. What are we gonna do? I can't play anywhere. Can't play the game because there's so much combat everywhere, you know? And I'm not opposed to the idea, but I don't see it as conducive to being an honest representation of what you could potentially do in Star Citizen. Because is it restricted to only players fighting, or is it anything fighting? Are the AI fighting? Because the AI could do that. Like, CIG moving the AI towards that sort of level of encounters. In fact, in the contested zones, sometimes you'll see the AI fighting each other. No players are involved in the fight. It's two groups of AI and they're shooting at each other. And then if they notice you, they all pivot on you. Our mate's trying to come up with solutions where they're trying to stop what they believe is a problem without changing the game too much now. Yeah, and if they're triggering that alert, there needs to be a tower that can actually send the alert out. We start naturally creating objectives as well, where it's like, all right, their radio tower that's going to be emitting their distress signal, we need to make sure we take that out first. Or if you're the group defending, it's like, all right, we need to make sure we defend the bloody radio tower, and if it goes down, we got to get it back up online ASAP. Yeah, that's right, Lever. It would be cool if you could intercept security comms to gauge response times, force strength when attacking a base. The Herald may finally have a place. Yeah, or the MSR. So I'm supposed to be able to do data running and collection. Parrot as well. I think the Corsair has something. See, I'm a big proponent for empowering players. So in this scenario here, I'd set it up so that, like, if I was the one developing the system, I'd try and probably go a three-tiered system. So if we're doing this in Stanton, you know, the comm array being up when an attack happens means that reinforcements will get notified and have a shorter, you know, response time. Then you've got the tower at the location where the attack's happening. So if the comm array is down but there's a tower there and it's active, it will be able to call for reinforcements still, but the signal takes longer to get there and it takes longer for them to respond. If the comm array is down and the tower is down, and we're in a system like Stanton, then the game should spawn NPCs to investigate after a longer period of time. Because Stanton's considered civilized space. So any remote outposts, and we do this in real life, any remote outposts are in constant communication with a home base in a more civilized area. So like all the bases in Antarctica have a direct connection to, you know, different countries by different communication means. And if those communication measures go down, after a period of time, they will send people over there to investigate. And that's what you should look at doing for a system like Stanton. Pyro doesn't really have comm arrays, so you're relying on those towers. And even then, like, if the tower goes down, maybe they'll be in reinforcements, maybe not. You know, you could base the potential of reinforcements on whether or not surrounding outposts are capable of being able to mount an investigation or something like that. I'm a big proponent of empowering players, so if for whatever reason you got to defend an outpost and, you know, like all the tower, you know, all lines of communication are down, you will eventually get reinforcements. It's just, it'll take the longest amount of time, and it'll motivate you to try and get those lines of communication back up. It also empowers you enough, it's like, all right, if we just hold out long enough, we're going to get some help eventually. And it also also puts the attacking force on the clock too, where it's like, all right, well, we need to make sure that, like, whilst we're dealing with this, that we also keep an eye out for any enemy reinforcements, intercept and destroy. You know, if the enemy send out a scouting group, and we need to make sure that we take them down so that they can't punch out a signal. That to me would be the more logical method of handling the lack of communication there, so that players can call for reinforcements at a base, or the NPCs there can call for reinforcements. And it also, you know, leans into the whole reputation system as well, and crime stat system, because it starts becoming one of those things where right now, like, if you go and attack, like, if the comrade is down on a moon or a planet, you have free reign. Even in civilized areas, you can do whatever you want against security, against anybody, and that doesn't make sense. Like, there's going to be cameras watching, there's going to be something recording you performing those actions. Getting the crime stat straight away makes sense, but you not getting a crime stat at all doesn't. What should happen is that if you want to mitigate getting those crime stats, you clean the space that you work in. Take down the comrade, take down the communication tower, do your business, and then sanitize the site so that no record of what you were doing is ever made. So if you're doing a bunker mission, clearing out security forces to steal some stuff from it, comrade down, power disabled, you go in, clear it out of all the security forces. There should be a terminal there to wipe the security camera records of whoever the fuck was there for the last like hour or two, any sort of records of ships showing up or anything like that. And the AI, the NPCs, taking their kit and then taking it somewhere to dispose of. So you can sell it to a shop and they'll wipe it and clean it down. Taking the bodies out into dead space and dumping them, or you can just leave them at the outpost, you know, all the naked bodies there, and they can be like, oh, you know, there's a massive mystery going on, like this outpost went dark and there's, you know, a stack of bodies there. Classic MO criminal activity, but we don't know who did it yet. That's probably going a bit deeper into what CIG's probably got planned, but yeah, that will happen one day, Lever. CIG's got plans for it.
That's how we get to the next step. In real life, if you go somewhere and cause a disturbance, the police or security will show up and try to remove you. This part is missing in Star Citizen. We do have some degree of NPC response to threats, but it seems to have decreased in recent years. And this is actually another thing CG can do to deter murder hobo behavior. They can significantly step up the NPC response to player disruptions, not just in the air but also on the ground. I am definitely looking forward to NPC improvements and seeing NPCs react more aggressively towards players who land in an outpost and start shooting. This is a problem especially in Pyro. CIG could possibly make use of spawn closets to spawn more and more NPC security to deal with the threat. And that brings us to reputation. Your reputation with different factions and even different settlements should impact how you're treated. Faction alignment would actually give meaning to coming in and destroying an outpost, but there would also have to be consequences to the perpetrator in terms of reputation and how they're treated based on that reputation. For example, if you have a bad reputation with a location, they might raise prices of goods they sell you. Same applies to repair and refuel. If you have a very bad reputation, they might start shooting as soon as you're in range.
This is all planned for but not yet implemented. Like, why is this person talking about offering solutions about stuff that's already getting added to the game? Like, what you're talking about there, that's literally what Chris Roberts has said in the past. Not Hitman style, but it's like, you know, you'll be able to disguise yourself, you know, hide your ship transponder. The specific example is the ship transponder one, where you could, like, have a different one installed, a fake one, that makes your ship look like it's owned by somebody else. But if, you know, for whatever reason, the ship that's scanning you has a better scanner than the transponder that you got, then they'll start attacking you and trying to detain you. And it's kind of the same situation with criminals being able to go to places like Terra and that, and being able to blend in. Like, you can disguise yourself, have fake IDs, but if you get too closely inspected, you might be recognized. Yeah, I remember that. Like, they removed it pretty quickly when they realized that players were getting around without their transponder on and just murdering other players. Well, I'm interested as well, Sora, to see what CIG does about that, because they're eventually going to have to dial up the security in Stanton a bit more. Once they put those transient jump points in, we won't be able to use the main jump gate to get to Pyro. So that's one way of getting around with a crime stab, but, you know, like, if you're interacting with the different locations, you know, going to outposts and things like that, like, how are we supposed to be able to, you know, utilize services if we've got a crime stat and we're over at Houston, when the only place that would let us gain those services will be over in Crusader at Grim Hex? So I'm interested to see what CIG does with that. They haven't talked about their hacking gameplay for quite a few years now, so we'll probably have to overhaul it again. Yeah, I agree. Like, no one pirate shouldn't be landing in like the cities or anything like that, or at the ports. But law enforcement and security forces should not be allowed to land at Grim. And it should be like hacking, like for a bounty hunter hacking their transponder to try and hide them. Should be one of those situations where it's like they need to go a step further and try and disguise themselves as a criminal, as opposed to just hacking it and making it look like they're somewhere else. How will the game determine between a murder hobo and a legit pirate killing you for your cargo? Without a differentiation, players doing legit piracy gameplay will get punished all the same as a murder hobo. Well, that's the thing, is like, there's a lot of assumptions being made secret. One of them is that those who engage in a murder hobo behavior only do so because lack of consequence, and the second that they add consequence, they're gonna stop doing it. Whereas pirates, we understand that there's going to be consequences behind what we're doing, and that we will just deal with the fact that we'll eventually get caught, or deal with the consequences when they actually come about. At the end of the day, the way I've always seen it is that murder is still murder, regardless of how many people you kill, if they're players or AI. Killing in this game should be considered a punishment. Like, it should be a punishable offense. How they differentiate is irrelevant. It should just be, okay, you killed this, other human being or this other living entity. This is your criminal charge for it, if they can prove that you did it. Bounty Hunters Guild, though, I'm not sure what your point you're getting across there, Z-Hub. Maybe with murder hobos, the more people die in an area and put out distresses, accumulate the threat level of that space, because legit pirates don't always kill that much as griefers. Like, what happens if there's a massive battle going on between two organizations, where you see Shadow Moses and Avenger Squad duking it out? Just randomly come across each other, and it's an attack of opportunity, and they're just constantly murdering each other. The hostility system that he's put in place kind of helps mitigate that scenario, where one group ends up being considered the aggressors and they'll start receiving the criminal charges. But you don't always want to be in that position. Like, if you've got a criminal group fighting security forces, you want the security forces to be empowered to actually attack the criminals, right? Which is once again why reputation matters. But murdering, killing other players is still something that should be considered, or just murder in general, should be considered a criminal act, regardless of your intent behind it. You murder bloody 10 players an hour over the course of 10 hours, and you've murdered 100 players in 10 hours, or murdered 100 players over the course of 100 days. The charges should still be the same. It shouldn't be different. The game shouldn't be differentiating that at all. It sets the precedence, of murder being bad. Would it be good if guilds could declare war against each other, and that is settled between guilds, and there would be no crime stat system in play between those guilds? No, I hate that. I don't like that sort of idea where you have to declare war. I don't know if CIG will end up introducing something like that. I hope they don't. And the reason for that is, like, the UEE does not want humanity warring against itself. Like, they're dealing with the Vandal threat, so they want everybody united to go fight the Vandal. And it doesn't help if there's organizations or groups or whatever you want to call them infighting, using all those war assets against each other, as opposed to the threat to humanity, the Vandal. So it doesn't make sense from a law perspective that they would even allow something like that. It'd be like, well, why don't you guys just take it in the courts, battle it out there. So declaring war or anything like that, then there's issues with the reputation system, the guild system that they're going to be bringing in play. So we all use organizations, but there's guilds which are supposed to sit higher above us, that are run by the simulation. And I know, like, pirate crews are going to duke it out over prizes, and we're all going to be part of the same guild, and we're going to be part of the council. We're all going to fall under the council, but we'll be fighting amongst ourselves, for prizes, for bases, for positions, for resources, and all that sort of good stuff. If we had to declare war against each other in that sort of capacity, it's like, well, then the council would probably just go, well, you two can fucking get out then, if you're going to fight like that, if they cared. So guilds could pay a massive bribe for the law to turn a blind eye for a while. I think CIG will introduce that, but in regards to, like, organization warfare, location matters. Like, criminals wouldn't care. Criminals just wouldn't care where we attack. Like, we'd fight, security organizations in Stanton. We have the numbers and we have the ability, we'll just do it there. Whereas for the security forces, they're not gonna come after us unless they know that they have the justification to. And that's the thing, and this is all part of the consequences that need to be introduced to the game, but something that the bloody person who made this video probably isn't considering, that the consequences apply to everyone. It's not just this labeled group that they want to make sure that or diminish their ability to play. Those consequences apply to everyone. So groups wanting to conduct war are going to have to learn to deal with those consequences. So if a lawful organization is going to war against an unlawful organization, they're going to have rules of engagement where they're like, all right, we don't shoot at them unless they shoot at us. And the reason for that is not only because they're lawful and it's a response thing, it's for the bloody hostility system to proc correctly. If we attack first and they don't have the reputation of being a criminal or the criminal charges or the bounty rap sheets or anything like that, but we know that they're a part of that org, if we attack first, we're the aggressors and we're committing a crime within UEE space, because we're not supposed to be going around attacking everybody. We lawful organizations still have to work within the bounds of the law. The difference between a lawful organization and an unlawful one is the unlawful organizations just disregard the rule of law. It doesn't change the fact that the rule of law is no longer there, right? It's just unlawful organizations disregard it. Lawful organizations have to factor it into how they operate in the gameplay space. They can't just be a law unto themselves, to the fucking bloody lamenting of what a lot of security organizations are going to find out. They're going to be like, yeah, we want to be able to have they're going to want a declaration system so that they can attack without any sort of consequence. But it ends up being the situation where it's like, well, if you guys get to attack without consequence, then we should be allowed to attack without consequence too. And it makes the whole idea behind having laws redundant if you have a declaration system. Like, oh, well, we'll just declare wars against all these other organizations. Well, what happens if they don't accept your declaration? What are you doing then, right? You're going to get into more trouble, even though you want to take out this organization that's got this prime spot that's collecting all these resources, or they're a potential threat to your base, and you want to take them down. You can't do it because they won't accept your declaration of war. Don't mind if you lose rep by killing other players, even send more NPCs to deal with you, fine, but it's players need to get into their head that this is a PvPvE game, period. Yeah, one of the hardest part is reporting in-game activity of any kind. Beacons, for example, don't serve their purpose. Yeah, like the game is all knowing, all seeing. Like when you kill somebody, the game knows that you killed them. It just comes down to CIG working out how they can gamify that particular scenario to make sense, so that if you want to be able to commit crimes, commit murder without any sort of repercussions, that they put the mechanics in there where it makes it difficult for the system to apply the criminal charge to your record. So like making sure that there's checks put in place that go, okay, was the comm up? Was there an active bloody tower around the place where this murder happened? What form of communication or recording device was nearby to say that this murder actually happened? Because the game already knows that you killed somebody. So it comes down to putting in systems that go, all right, are these additional conditions being satisfied, where we can sit there and go, yep, there's a criminal charge that we need to apply there. Because if not, then you got away with murder. All right, let's keep watching, because we're not even halfway through yet.
Let's look at a few examples. Let's say that you have a player in Stanton trying to cause some trouble. Let's say they decide to destroy some ships that are landed at an outpost. Since it's a monitored area, it will give them a crime stat and negatively impact their reputation with the faction that owns the outpost, the corporation that governs the area, and by extension the UE. Having a crime stat prevents this player from landing in most locations in Stanton, but they can still retreat to Pyro or to Grimhex for fuel and repairs. Let's say that the player is a first-time offender, so when they eventually get caught or turn themselves in, they serve a short prison sentence. This removes their crime stat, but the negative reputation stays. This means that the affected factions might not allow the player to land or even approach their facilities. Think of this as the trespass warning you get around bunkers or the ATC refusing to give you a hangar. The player can change their ways and build reputation back until they're allowed to be in these areas again. However, if they choose to reoffend, their reputation will progressively get worse. And even if they are committing crimes in one part of Stanton, their reputation will eventually start getting worse everywhere else. For example, if the player is committing crimes around Hurston, the reports will eventually float up to the advocacy, and they will distribute them to the other factions related to the UEE in the area. And having a worsening reputation would gradually have harsher consequences. For example, you would get scanned more often.
Like, I know CIG's talked about this reputation system, and right now, when you leave prison, your reputation is pretty much neutralized. what it's supposed to be. I don't think they do it based on the negative reputation gets neutralized, and then any positive reputation that you've got with different groups you maintain, because the reputation system is also tied to the ability to get missions. I'm not sure if I like the whole it cascading on, but it's like, for me, I don't really care. Like, I don't care about this fucking reputation system shit. I really don't. Like, I understand from a game design perspective how it actually can impact and influence the gameplay so that, you know, players feel more empowered and things like that. But I'm not going to care about my reputation with different criminal factions unless it's a fucking barrier to something. And in which case, I'm going to be pissed if I have to do PvE shit to fucking increase that reputation with them so I can access services. So I don't want to do PvE stuff. I don't want to be doing those missions. I genuinely don't care about the gameplay space in the lore of the game or anything like that. I want to go fight other players. I want to build bases, build space stations, get into capital class ship battles, pirate other players for their resources, fight other players off who are trying to pirate us. Like, the PvE side of the game, when it comes to like mission running and things like that, I genuinely do not care for. So when they're talking about this reputation system and NPCs not, you know, providing services or increasing the amount of you know, the cost of goods and things like that, it's like, I don't care. I'll work out ways to deal with that. But if it ends up being the situation where it's like I can't get access to something because I haven't done the PvE missions to build up a reputation with a group, I'm going to be angry. Criminal factions like Ninetales offer player bounties on people who kill Ninetale NPCs. Yeah, like Ninetales should be offering bounties on people who have negative rep with Ninetales, just like the UEE should be like, yep, this person's got negative rep with us and they've got criminal charges. But the Ninetales won't care about the law. Yeah, like I just do not, I'm not interested in that side of things. And if you are, that's fine, you know, like fill your boots, go do that sort of thing. But me, I want to just be able to play the game and not have to worry about PvE missions. Yeah, like the reputation system, as long as I can build it up through, you know, other means other than the PvE missions, it's gonna be frustrating for me. Like the Save Stanton event, I was doing it until we got to the Idris event, and then it's like kill 3 Idrises, and I'm like, oh, can't be bothered. I genuinely can't be bothered. You know, some people saying just go on the server and just pick up the mission and somebody else will kill it for you. And I'm like, I can't even be bothered to do that. If I'm gonna play, I'm gonna play. I'm not gonna just stand around or log my game in and just leave it running, you know, if I can't play. The Citizens for Prosperity and the Headhunters rep don't care about that stuff either. The main reason why I do that is to farm the gear that they've got, so I don't have to buy it. And they've got more interesting kit anyway.
Often by patrols, even if you don't have a crime stat, and eventually you would be barred from entering cities and stations or even fired upon immediately. This creates a separation between the short-term consequences of a crime, which is a crime stat, which can be removed and marks you as hostile to pretty much everyone, and the long-term consequences of multiple crimes, which is reputation, which gradually makes it more difficult for you to get equipment and fuel in some areas, which makes logistics difficult for you, and of course increasingly harsh prison sentences every time you get caught. But in our Stanton example, you still have Grimhex as an area where you can reliably get everything you might need. But if the player chooses the path of a murder hobo, they might end up having a very bad reputation with everyone in Stanton and a neutral reputation with Grimhex. At which point they might be more trouble than they are worth, because even though Grimhex is a criminal hideout, they mostly want to go on about their business and don't want troublemakers. So at some point, even Grimhex might refuse a player with really bad reputation, which leaves them only one option: move to Pyro or another lawless system. And I think now is a good time to talk about lawless systems.
How does that work if you can't access services though, right? Like, if your reputation is that bad, you can't access services. You can't operate your ships. If you can't operate your ships, how are you going to get to Pyro? Oh, I'll get somebody else to take me there. You've got a really bad reputation, and if everybody can see that, then nobody's going to want anything to do with you. What can you end up doing? Like, here's the thing is, old mate's talking about consequences, and it's like, all right, well, what's the pathway to redemption? You know, how does this player deal with the consequences of their action? Submit themselves to law enforcement? How are they going to get the access to the counter missions to build up their rep? Right? It's not a very well thought out idea, the whole reputation system that I'm putting forward. And it's something where COG can't make it so that you get to a certain point and there's no way back. So if you PvP eventually, you just won't be able to play the game. Yeah, that's the thing, is like, you know, that's why I'm talking about toxic militant anti-PvP, you know, Carebears putting these ideas forward. It's like discussing the pathway forward, the pathway to redemption. How do you come back from this? And if it's about just killing players for no reason, which you don't know what that reason is. So to this guy, it's always going to be for no reason if he doesn't understand the context. The pathway to redemption to get him back so that you can, leave that system and go to Pyro and go back to being your murder hobo self. How are you able to do that if you can't access services? Can't call up ships, can't repair your ships, can't get fuel or anything like that. The toxic, militant, anti-PvP mindset will go, well, that's what you fucking get for being a murder hobo, you piece of shit. Now you can't play the game. Good on you. Eat a bag of dicks. Glad you can't play the game now. Now you can't disturb my gameplay. Meanwhile, that person is there just like, well, this is all allowable in the gameplay rules, right? So there should always be a pathway to some sort of redemption. That's why I don't believe CIG will go that far, to the point where it's like you can't access anything, or the other criminal factions will be like, oh yeah, that's a bit too much noise there that you're making.
I think that Pyro being called lawless is being misunderstood by some players. So let's break down the different types of control and oversight. We have lawful systems like Stanton or Terra, which are claimed and governed by an official government of some sort. So this would be the UEE, or the Banyu Protectorate, or the Xi'an Empire. These governments have a set of laws, a legal system, and a police force or military to enforce it. In the UEE, this would be the advocacy or the Navy. Obviously, in Stanton, we have corporate governments, but these are still a subset of the UEE legal system. So while they have their own rules and law enforcement, they still apply the UEE common law. So it would make sense that if you're a known criminal somewhere in the UEE, you will be a known criminal everywhere in the UEE. But your reputation with the local factions might be different. You might have a bad reputation with the factions in Terra, but you might be relatively unknown to factions in Stanton or Castra. Then we have lawless systems like Pyro or Nyx. In this case, lawless means there is no central authority and no defined law to be enforced. But there are still factions or a faction that lay claim to parts or the whole system, and they have some rules that they want to enforce. For example, don't kill members of our faction. So while these factions might be hostile to each other, and they might have conflicts happening in the border areas, they will likely want to keep the peace in their core stations and facilities, so they can maintain their supply chain. After all, if you're in a near constant conflict with another faction in the same system, you want your home front to be relatively calm, so you don't have to pull troops and resources from the front lines. And finally, we have the unclaimed or frontier systems. This
shit's already been talked about. This is planned for but not yet implemented.
Areas that are either completely unpopulated or only have some very small outposts and homesteads. There is no central authority to govern or any major faction that lays claim to the system. The outposts might enforce some rules, but only in a limited area, possibly only in their direct surroundings. So this would be the true lawless area where no one will tell you what to do. But since you're in a remote and unpopulated area, you would be losing access to most creature comforts. Fuel, components, and gear would be rare, mostly crafted and low quality. And generally there would be few places to rest or respawn. So now that we have outlined that, let's have a look at our murder hobo in Pyro. Once they arrive to Pyro, they will find themselves with plenty of targets and also unlimited access to gear and logistics. Because in Pyro, nobody cares if the UEE doesn't like you, so our player finds a target and starts their rampage. And here it starts getting interesting. By attacking outposts and members of a certain faction, they might start gaining a positive reputation with the rival factions. And this might, in some cases, actually incentivize the player to start engaging with the narrative of the game and align themselves with one of the factions.
Why is this person talking about this shit like they're suggesting to CIG that this is what they should do? This is planned for. We literally have a working example at the moment of citizens of Pyro and the headhunters. Like, this actually exists now. It's just not widespread. And this video is becoming more of a waste of time.
And in theory, this would rehabilitate them into a normal outlaw player. They would still face hostility and logistics difficulties, but since they're aligned with one of the factions, they have a source of income and equipment, and they can still do their desired gameplay of attacking players and outposts. However, some players will choose violence and just attack anyone and anything they find, so they will eventually degrade their reputation so much that every faction in Pyro will be hostile to them. Now, this would mean a few things. First of all, every faction, outpost, or station would shoot the player right away. The player would be marked as hostile to all the members of that faction, and very likely the factions would put out bounties on the player. With no safe haven, this would make existence in Pyro unsustainable, so the player would have to move again, either to another lawless system and repeat the process, or to one of the frontier systems. And
how? If they've contradicted themselves, and this is why this doesn't work. If killing people from one faction raises your reputation with another, so one reputation is going negative and the other one's going positive, and then you go to the other place and you start killing their people, guess what happens? Your reputation just doesn't keep going down and stay down. It starts balancing out again, and the reputation that was negative before starts becoming more positive, and the reputation that was less positive or more positive starts becoming more negative. So in a system like Pyro, with the working examples of Citizens of Prosperity and Headhunters, if you built up a positive reputation with Headhunters by murdering Citizens of Pyro, Citizens of Prosperity, which I believe English is my native language, right? If you started then murdering bloody headhunters, the Citizens of Prosperity would start increase, like your reputation would start becoming a little bit more positive. Where this person isn't considering the fact that it's a seesaw with the reputation system with these two factions. And it comes down to how CIG wants to handle it, like gaining negative reputation is easier than positive rep. then you could end up in the position where your negative rep is worse for both factions, but it might not be as bad. But a lot of this is planned for but not yet implemented. And unless CIG makes it so that gaining negative rep is easier than gaining positive rep, which will piss a lot of PvE players off. They'll be like, why is it so like it's so punishing, you know, it's too punishing, CIG. You know, stop making it so that I gain negative rep so easy and make it so hard that gaining positive rep takes so long. But then CIG balances it according to their bloody complaints. And then they're like, but all the fucking murder hobos, you know, they can just switch factions that they're attacking and they'll be able to regain their reputation. This whole premise behind the reputation system is just like they're not thinking it through. They're still thinking it from this lens of trying to stop murder hobos, which I would argue don't really exist to the extent that this person says they do. Rapidly losing faith in CIG on a variety of levels. That's a curious thing to be saying at the moment, Marty. He did just release the server meshing pack. Like, if anything, while server meshing is not perfect, it went a lot better than what most people were expecting. You have 3 versions of the game in the launcher and all are broken beyond anything reasonable. There's just one point of contention. Like, to say broken beyond anything reasonable, are you talking about like you just can't log in at all? Because that would be broken beyond anything reasonable. Like, you're back in Star Citizen, right? They're still not done yet. New PTU is actually pretty good, actually, today's patch. I don't think I've tried the new PTU or any of the... I haven't played the PTU. I haven't tried the 1 patch. And you get an invite. Wouldn't be too concerned about builds being broken. Like, I agree. COG does need to work on stability. Although, like, the game is still going to be in that alpha state because it's not feature complete. It'll always be called alpha until it's feature complete. But I do believe they need to stabilize what they've got now so that they can then progress without having to constantly chase tech debt. Because that's another thing that they're suffering with that at the moment. But whenever we're dealing with shit servers and things like that, man, I always reflect on where we started to where we are now. And it kind of puts it in perspective. You know, like, we're playing in an environment where we're going across different servers. Well, it is playable. When the stars and planets align, you know, make sure you cast your chicken bones before you log in. So if you got a goat, sacrifice it, and you just might get onto a good server. Like, it just ends up being the situation, man, where it's like people will start getting tired of the environment, and you just might be in that position where you just need to take a break. There's nothing wrong with that, man. Taking a break can be good. Good for the soul, good for the mind, good for the sanity. Yeah, that's why I always say the people who play the game as much as I do, you know, we're just crazy. We're the crazy ones because we're willing to punish ourselves over and over again, you know, playing that game. Yeah, like, I do believe CIG needs to work on their stabilizing what they've got, and apparently that's what they're doing. They've already got all the money that they need. And here's the thing, is like, if backers stopped backing, right, Chris Roberts has more than enough capital invested in all the things that he's built that he would be able to get loans, he'd be able to get investors, and he'd still be able to finish, and it would still just take just as long. Whenever I'm dealing with this sort of scenario here, like, I get it, Marty, you're upset and you want the game to be playable. It's still going to be 2 years away. Like, the development pace is always going to be slower than what you want it to be. At times it feels glacial, but backers have been saying it for years. You need to stabilize the game, you need to fix the game, you need to do this, you need to make it a better experience. The OG's continued plodding along and have just continued iterating and building and expanding on the gameplay mechanics. It's coming, dude. It's not going to come at the speed that you want it at. And complaining to CIG is not going to really achieve anything. Like, everybody's sitting there going, yeah, we want a playable game. It's like, cool, come back in 2 years then. We've still got all the other stuff to put in there. With the game not being feature complete, we're still going to have to add gameplay mechanics. We haven't even got the next iteration of the bounty hunting system. You know, bounty hunter markers don't work at the moment. I believe part of the reason why is because the movement of players between the different servers within a shard. Like, sorry dude, but that's not going to happen for a long time. Like, you keep saying that the basics, those aren't basics. Like, being able to move is a basic thing. That's probably the most basic thing that you need to be able to do. If you're falling through the geometry, the OG doesn't know why straight away. Could be server related, could be terrain related. They could fix it so that you never fall through the terrain based on server frame rates, and then it just turns out that the collision for the terrain mesh on a specific moon just wasn't working. And they won't know until you do it. They get the basics working until the core tech is in. We're on the last stretch, just need dynamic server meshing now, which is why they talked about stability this year as they're getting this done. Yeah, but there's other stuff as well. Execute, like, CIG would have had to have done some janky stuff to get things that we interact with on a regular basis to work properly, right? And they would have to go back to those things and undo that work and then kind of redo that work based on the new environment that it's in. So, you know, that's part of stabilizing gameplay interactions. But I'm going to tell you guys now, like, if you're expecting to be able to, like, stop trying to show people Star Citizen. Hey, show them videos and go, the gameplay experience is nothing like that most of the time. Those are like the exceptions as opposed to the rule. Yeah, like, if you're frustrated with the current state of the game, just stop playing. Complaining isn't going to get them to fix it. They know the problems that they need to fix. It doesn't help that the marketing department is as aggressive as they are, you know, because those who regularly follow the project, you know, we see through the marketing bullshit, and they do need to address that. But CIG is probably less reluctant to do anything about that because that pays their bills, keeps them going, enables them to expand and grow. I don't like their marketing tactics either. I understand why they utilize them, but I don't like it. And I don't think a lot of backers like the way that CIG's marketing team approaches the presentation of the game. But they're also still selling the vision, you know, like that's what Star Citizen's been about for years, selling a vision. So it's no surprise that the marketing team just dialed it up to 11. Anyway, we're getting way off topic here. I want to finish off this video because Star Citizen has a murder hobo problem according to this Carebear, and they're reiterating shit that CIG's already told us and saying it in a way that it makes it sound like it's their idea.
Being in a frontier system, the player doesn't have a lot of options to sustain themselves. They can start crafting and building their outpost, or raid the existing player and NPC.
You already know my thoughts on Squadron 42, Marty. You already know.
Outposts for equipment and food. It would also lock the player out of access to pretty much everything. There would be few hangars to spawn ships, and no insurance company would deliver there. It would very much be an everyone for themselves kind of a situation, and existence and survival would be difficult, as was originally intended. You also have to remember that only players who want to live in these areas or murder hobos would find themselves in this situation. So I think it would be pretty interesting to watch. The point is that players who can't be bothered to engage in the narrative of the game and only want to disrupt the gameplay of other players would be confined away from everyone else and with each other. This obviously has some issues. First of all, most people get a crime stat by accident. Either you bump into a ship while landing, or you accidentally shoot a guard while clearing a bunker. For the extensive reputation system to work, this needs to be fixed. For ship accidents, I actually like what Elite Dangerous does. Every location imposes a speed limit. You can exceed it, but if you hit someone while doing so, you are charged with a crime. If you're under the speed limit, you have to pay a fine, and that's it. I think this is a pretty elegant system. For accidentally shooting a guard, things are a bit complicated. I think this should result in a loss of payment and reputation with the issuing faction, rather than a crime stat. Additionally, I would have these missions generate an optional objective to revive the guards, which would lower the penalty for accidentally shooting one. With some calibration, this could probably fix the accidental crime stat problem. There is a general problem of detecting and flagging crimes in Star Citizen, and I think that's the big blocker on a wider reputation system as well. I wonder if CIG could use AI or a neural net to analyze game logs and identify crimes from that, even if retrospectively. The other, much bigger problem is that removing a player from locations with other players actually won't stop them from coming back and being disruptive. Nothing really stops the murder hobo from loading up their ship and gear in a frontier system at their base and flying all the way back to Stanton to wreak havoc. Technically, they should run out of fuel at some point on that journey, but nothing stops them from stealing fuel or another ship on the way. Also, some murder hobos are actually organized, so technically nothing stops them from bringing a starfarer to refuel on the way. But
We're privileged under 17, not admitted without a parent. Yeah. Do we still get the opportunity to buy a ship for completing Squadron 42? Yeah, I don't know. Like at this point, I'm surprised old mate hasn't fucking suggested CIG we force players to install a breathalyzer into their PC to start it.
But at that point, if you are organized as a group and have a base and you raid surrounding areas for resources, that makes you a raider rather than a murder hobo. And technically, that would be valid gameplay. At the
Oh, because what their intent is. Like, this is what I mean though. Like the person who gets killed has no idea the reason behind the person doing the killing, right? They don't have any idea, so they're just going to declare that, oh, that person's a murder hobo. They might have been told, go and clear that outpost of any sort of threats, because we're about to come in there with our own guys and we're going to sell the cargo there. That's what we do. Sometimes we'll go to Grim Hex and, like, if we see ships that we think are hostile, our fighters will destroy them, just so that we don't take that risk of our bloody prize ship getting taken out by somebody fucking deciding to size 12 torpedo it. But that player that's getting shot up is going to be like, why am I getting attacked by these fighters? I don't know, fucking murder hobo, pieces of shit. They have no idea what the fuck is going on. That's why this whole mentality behind, oh yeah, Star Citizen's full of murder hobos is idiotic. Because the people that are doing the complaining, the ones who died and doing the complaining, they have no idea why it happened. And they just make an assumption. 50-80 or 50-90. No idea execute. I haven't really paid much attention to the latest cards. I'm waiting a little bit longer before I start looking into it, because there's too much controversy around the bloody AI generated frames and shit like that. I want to hear more about it.
same time, many players that engage in this behavior have all accounts that can serve as their logistics chain, which you can't really prevent. So is there any way you could restrict these players? Well, there are a few actually, but all of them are very non-immersive and restrictive. First of all, as I said a moment ago, living in the frontier system means that you have a limited access to a hangar or insurance. So if you lose your ship, that's it. But that potentially locks players out of ships they paid for, which is not great. But it might be the only real deterrent.
That's not gonna happen. Like, you'll never be put into a position with a ship that you bought with real money. You'll never be put in a position where you can't get it back. It's just how long it takes to get back to you. That's what matters. And the condition it comes back to you in. We actually touched on this a bit at CitizenCon last year. But once again, like, this guy is just making up stuff. It almost feels like they're saying stuff that they think he hasn't thought of yet. And going, yeah, they should do it this way. It's like, some of the stuff is planned for but not yet implemented. And some of the stuff that he's saying that CIG is planning on doing isn't going to work the way that he thinks it is.
Could also implement a sort of a customs check, meaning that once the player enters a system that is controlled by a faction, they get immediately stopped and scanned or attacked by a patrol. But I feel like that might break immersion. My final idea is imprint control. It would make sense that the UEE has some kind of a centralized database of all imprints. So if you're enough of a threat, they could seize your imprint, so that when you die, rather than respawning where you said your spawn, you are going to respawn in prison. But again, that is not very immersive, but I wonder if non-immersive means might be the only ones that are effective. In conclusion, Star Citizen has a...
If CIG introduces that as a measure where it's like, yep, it doesn't matter where you are, if you die and you've got a large enough criminal rap sheet, you're going to get sent to prison, I'm going to be fucking livid about that. That is bullshit. At no point should there ever be some sort of magic system that sends you to prison. It should always be related to law enforcement. I get the idea behind your imprint being redirected from a medical bed to the prison system, but if I'm out on frontier space, an unclaimed system, and I die there, I should be respawning at the closest fucking meat printer that I am allowed to spawn at, as opposed to the UEE going, holy shit, Agent Letty just died, we're gonna quickly intercept that, you know, meat printer and fucking send them to Klesher. It better, Spike, it better always depend on that, because fucking what old mate's suggesting there, I'd be so angry. Alright, we've got like a minute and a half, let's finish this video off.
The murder hobo problem, and there is nothing CIG can do about it in the short term. They have to develop systems to address this and add spaces where these players can be moved, away from everyone else. And since reputation and improved law systems and NPC response are still very far away from being developed, this might become a critical issue for Star Citizen. It might even get to the point where murder hobos push out every other player group, which would be a problem, because actual murder hobos are actually a very small portion of the population. I believe that implementing reputation and the ability for players to become members of outlaw factions or create outlaw factions on their own would give people who would right now be branded as murder hobos a legitimate gameplay. At the same time, it would promote healthy PvP interactions in the form of faction warfare and bounty hunting. I would also like to point out that Captain Burks posted a great thread on this about Spectrum. It touches...
Yes, he posted a thread. I would not call it fucking great. I reacted to it last week. Still need to get it out on the fucking Mongrel signal, but holy shit. Everything that old mate's talking about there. The point. I'll finish the video off first because we're like 20 seconds away, and then I'll make my point.
Is on a lot of things I talked about, and there is excellent discussion going on, so I will try to remember to link it in the description or the pinned comment. And with that being said, that's all for today. What do you think?
I couldn't be bothered listening to the last few seconds. Alright, we're gonna come over here, get the music back on. His last point that he was making with regards to murder hobos pushing all the players out of the game. We posted so many videos of us doing piracy over the years. It's slowed down a lot in the last, let's say, 18 months, because the gameplay really hasn't evolved much beyond what we've got. It's like changed slightly, but since 3.18, piracy has pretty much been the same gameplay loop. Complete, just needs like, you know, flavoring added to it. Yeah, Donnie, 100% it's leaning into that. But old mate's point, like all the murder hobos are going to drive out all the players, is a load of shit. We've been hearing that for years. We see people post that on our videos. At the height of us posting videos where we were doing 3 videos a week, we were getting told constantly, you're going to push away players, you're going to cause, you know, people to not want to play the game and things like that. And the funding just kept going up, and the number of people joining the community kept going up. We didn't do shit. We had no impact in stopping people from wanting to play the game. In fact, we probably inspired more people to want to play Star Citizen. Yeah, the Space Coders video. It is a video disguised as like leading into I want PvE servers, right? That's what it's leaning into. Like their idea behind the PvP flag system, like is just ripe for abuse. So much abuse could be done with it. And it makes bloody trying to do organization-based warfare frustrating. It makes it easier to cheese the logistics chains for it. And then all the other suggestions that old mate was making, most of them, the COG is already planning to do it. We have dedicated PvP servers, it's called Arena Commander. Don't forget, there, buddy, though, that Arena Commander also has PvE only gameplay loops. Vandal Swarm, Pirate Swarm, and then if you go into offline mode, Racing, where you can race against the time with no players around. But yeah, like, Star Citizen doesn't have a murder hobo problem. It has a fucking Carebear problem. Yeah, old mate, the way that he's talking about Star Citizen having a murder hobo problem, it's just more toxic, militant, anti-PvP fucking Carebears trying to shape Star Citizen in a way where PvP can't exist and that emergent gameplay is pretty much killed off. Then I'm 100% against it.